On your Monday episode of Locked On Raptors, we're talking about the bigs in the 2024 NBA draft class, who fits best with the Raptors, who doesn't, and who might still be there at 19 when the Raptors are on the clock. We'll get into all that with one of the very best draft experts out there, Keandre from Intellect. It's all coming up. Thanks for hanging.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome to another episode of Locked On Raptors, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. It is Monday, June the 17th, and I'm your host, Sean Woodley. I've been covering the Toronto Raptors now for 10 seasons on various platforms. You can find all my work over on the Very Bad website at Woodley Sean. You can find the show on Instagram at Locked On Raptors. And of course, you can join us over in the Locked On Raptors Discord server. The link in the description of the podcast. It's free to join as always. It's a great place to come hang out, talk ball, talk finals, talk draft. It's all in there. We even talking like video games and whatnot. Shout out to my Balatro heads. Come hang out in the Discord to talk about Balatro if that game is driving you insane and taking over your life, just as it is mine. It's all there. Link in the description as always. Of course, you can find the show for free wherever you get your podcasts. Follow, subscribe, rate, review, tell a friend. Always appreciate it when you support the show on the audio side of things. You can also go to YouTube and support the YouTube channel. If you subscribe there, you can also hit the notification bell and get a heads up every single time the show is about to premiere or go live. It's much appreciated when you support the show on YouTube as well. Today's show is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedInNBA. Use the code, all lowercase, LockedInNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. All right, let's get rolling here. Very excited for today's show because on the show with me is someone who I count on heavily during draft season because he is one of the single best draft analysts out there. He runs the wonderful Hoop Intellect YouTube channel. Everyone should go and check that out. I certainly do just about every day this time of year. It is Keandre Ashley. Keandre, thank you so much for being here, man. I'm really excited to talk draft with you. How are you?
I'm doing good. It's a busy time of the year, but I can't complain at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating draft. It really does seem that way, right? Like, it seems like there's so much up in the air. We're going to get into the big class, specifically the guys who should be around the Raptors range at 19. But have you had like fun with this just class as a whole, just kind of trying to sort through things? It feels like everyone has their own guys that they've kind of latched onto and have higher than consensus. How have you enjoyed this sort of bizarro lead up to this specific draft?
Yeah, it's been a lot different than a lot of the classes in the past. There's not that Victor Wembanyama guy or even a few guys towards the top who we kind of know are just going to stick in that sort of range. So it's kind of been all over the place, especially as we start to get into that 10 to beyond range. That's when you start to see a whole lot of names in a lot of different orders in a way that hasn't really been there in some other classes. So I think it's been fun to just, especially at the beginning of the year, just trying to identify different players and see where a lot of different younger freshmen go and all that. So that's been definitely a good thing to track this year.
Do you have like a guy that you really kind of hitched your wagon to as like, I'm going down with the ship? This is the guy I think is going to be like, I'm higher on this guy than most, and I don't care what anyone says. I'm sticking to it.
I would probably say that has become Ron Holland. Now, it wasn't always that way earlier in the year, but as things have gone on and his stock has kind of gone more late lottery, I would still consider him towards the top 5. And I don't think even people who are lower on him would say that was crazy, but it is become a little bit more unpopular. So I would probably go with Ron Holland, and then there's some other guys kind of after that point who I guess you would say I'm a little higher on than the consensus.
We'll get to the bigs in a sec, but I do want to stop on Ron Holland for 1 second because he was someone who, during the time where it seemed like the Raptors might have a top 6 pick, I had to do a lot of Ron Holland study, right? I was like kind of just covering my bases in the event the Raptors were picking high to kind of have a good idea of all these guys. And I found myself pretty nonplussed by Ron Holland compared to some of the other wings at the top of the class. But recently, it seems like there are even mocks that are having him slide all the way to the Raptors at 19, which feels pretty far-fetched. You would think that someone who just kind of goes for upside and talent, like say the Thunder at 12, that should sort of be a guy like Holland's floor. But if he ends up there at 19, like, okay, I could talk myself into that as opposed to in the top 6. How I'm not sure how plugged in you are, or sort of what has been the reason why he's been falling, do you think, in the sort of general public favor? And do you think there is a chance he's there at 19 for the Raptors? And sort of on top of that, what would that fit be like, do you think?
Yeah, just from a outsider perspective, no like necessarily insight on certain rumors that have kind of circulated. I don't really have a first-hand or second-hand source in that respect, but just from statistically what he did this year in the G League, obviously shooting about 24% from three, having some of those early turnover struggles. He had 10 against the Salt Lake City Stars early in the season. There was a lot going on with him taking on those primary initiator responsibilities that he just has never had in the past. And you do that at a pro level, obviously it's not going to look very good, and the team failed because of it. But yeah, I think it's just a combination of one, some fit questions, and obviously the Ignite not having maybe the type of success that they wanted when the program started. You've got that going there with like a modest Buzelis and some of their other prospects. Ethan Almansa dropped out of the draft today completely, which wasn't something that we would have projected earlier in the year. So I think you've got that piece, and then you've also got some thoughts about his workouts not going according to plan, and just how that looks if a team doesn't have the sort of reps or runway to give him. There could be a fall that would go in place for somebody who you think might be able to fill a role or a niche a little bit easier. But for me personally, I still buy his improvement year over year in going from being more of that power forward play finisher type to showing more things on the perimeter, being able to get to the basket as often as he did in those situations. I think he'll be able to translate a little bit more in more of an off-ball role and something that makes more sense for him. And then obviously the shot is a big thing in question, but I would at least buy it improving over time. So that's why I'm a little bit higher, but those are valid concerns, and understandably something that teams are and people are a little bit more hesitant on.
Makes perfect sense. That said, like if he's there at 19, Masai Ujiri drafting a sort of shooting questionable, like long explosive wing, that feels exactly like the type of thing they would want to do.
And I think to your earlier question about the Raptors fit, I think at that point you just kind of figure it out. Obviously there would be some issues there with RJ, Scotty, and just kind of the current construction of this team, but long term, a guy who has that type of talent, I think it'd be hard to pass if you just figure it out on the fly.
Yeah, that feels like one where it's just like, oh, we didn't expect this to happen, but like kind of throw out the playbook. We take the high upset guy and figure out who else we're going to take at 31, whoever's there. We're going to come back on the other side here, Keandre. We're going to get into the bigs in this class. In particular, there's 6 guys who I think should be or could be there at 19, who I think the Raptors should look at taking. And frankly, as the sort of pre-draft sort of scuttlebutt continues to evolve, I feel like maybe the Raptors are going to have to take one of those guys at 19, because I'm not sure any will be there at 31, whereas the wing crop might still have some guys left over there when they pick in the second round. We're going to get into Zach Edey, Yves Missi, Kel'el Ware, Daron Holmes, Tyler Smith, Kyle Filipowski, all coming up here with Keandre on the show. We'll do that coming up in just one sec. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at LinkedIn Jobs, the single best place to hire for your small business when you want to find quality professionals that are right for your role and you want to get those fast. You got to check out LinkedIn Jobs. They have the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn is not just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion with a B professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. If it gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else, LinkedIn does all that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. You should too. You don't got time to be sorting through resumes and doing interviews. Have LinkedIn be the thing that makes hiring super easy and quick, so you can focus on the things you got to do every day to run your small business. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedNBA. That's linkedin.com/lockedNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Back at it here with Keandre from the wonderful Hoop Intellect YouTube channel. Everyone go and check out that. Speaking of YouTube channels, check out Locked On Sports Today 24/7, our all-day streaming channel, which has Locked On shows running 24 hours, 7 days a week. It's a wonderful thing, covering the local stories in sports with our local experts. Of course, the big national stories being covered by our national shows as well. Stanley Cup Finals, NBA Finals. It's all there for you. Go check it out. Locked On Sports Today 24/7. All right, Keandre, big men. That's what you're here for. Let's talk about some bigs in this draft. I mentioned the 6 guys who it feels like the Raptors will be choosing from if they are going to go for a big at 19. I kind of went into this pre-draft process thinking wings. The Raptors need wing help, but as time has gone along, watching the playoffs and watching the teams that just had lots of size and, multiplicitous big men available to sort of throw it in different lineups. I guess maybe just watching, frankly, the Minnesota Timberwolves take down the Denver Nuggets with a whole team of bigs. I feel like maybe it's a little bit more incumbent upon the Raptors to address that in this draft. And 19 feels like it might have to be the spot. It just feels like a lot of the wing guys have, bigger questions. There's maybe more of them who might be available a little bit later at 31. Whereas the guys we're going to talk about here all feel like they could be off the board by, say, the mid-20s. Let's start with, the topic du jour seemingly every day here in Canada these days is Zach Edey, the Canadian himself, 7'4", 300 pounds. We know the story now, 2-time defending National Player of the Year, a really, really good college basketball player and a really enormous man. I have been a little bit lukewarm on the idea of Edey with the Raptors. I think the Raptors should be focusing more on sort of switch bigs, guys who can give them a little bit more positional versatility or defensive versatility, schematic versatility, guys who can play next to, say, Kelly Olynyk and cover up for his weaknesses at the 4 defensively, someone who can offer a different look to Jakob Poeltl. I don't quite think that's Zach Edey, but there are a lot of people who think Zach Edey is like a top 10 talent at this draft. Where do you come down on Edey and his potential fit with the Raptors? I talked a lot about him on a podcast last week, but I want to get as many sort of outside thoughts on him as possible because I think he is one of the more polarizing guys in this draft.
Yeah, he's definitely polarizing. I'm kind of in the same boat as you in terms of being a little lukewarm-ish. Earlier in the season, I was a lot lower on him, but I do think just his sheer size and having that as something that is a mismatch in the NBA in a lot of places is going to be something that allows him to have a fairly high floor and an ability to make an impact. I like his touch around the rim. I think that he's going to have to make a big adjustment in terms of style of play, both offensively and defensively. Offensively, just being more of a screener, not having 20 post-up looks a game. That's why I think his production can be a little bit misleading in some ways, just being so much bigger than everybody and having the entire show ran around you at Purdue. But I do think that he's got the potential. I like his motor. I think he's got enough stamina to last in the NBA, and I think that was a big question mark for him earlier as an underclassman in college. And then the defense is the thing that's made me a little bit more skeptical because while he has gotten better in terms of his mobility and being able to, close some gaps in pick and roll and not just be the guy who gets lit up by a Johnny Davis earlier in his career in that drop defense, but still being able to, as high as pick and rolls are set in the NBA today, I just think it's going to be a really difficult job for him to contain a Damian Lillard, to contain a Steph Curry, even down to, let's go Darius Garland or somebody like that, just dealing with that threat and having to play to the level. I think that's going to be a huge adjustment for him. Now, that may be the thing that, if he's able to do well enough, swings him to be a, multi-year starter and somebody who makes a huge impact in the league. But I tend to err more on the side of caution there. Especially for a team like the Raptors, I think that, you hit on some of those points with having more versatility, and you got a guy like Scotty Barnes and being able to maximize him defensively and just what he does offensively as well, and having room to create driving lanes and make plays. I think that Edey could potentially throw that off a bit. But depending on how the draft goes, I still think he's at least someone worth, sniffing around on and kind of bringing him in and seeing what he's capable of doing and molding his game. But there could be some better options in that range.
Yeah, the Edey stuff is like, it's fascinating, right? It's almost like a physics question of like how fast can a guy who's 7'4", 300 pounds actually move when it kind of comes down to it? Like, is there an even like a physical possibility for him to get better at that specific thing, coming up to the level of the screen and sort of navigating all that space? It's a fascinating thing. So I guess this is where my sort of non-scouting background comes into play, because I look at Zach Edey and Donovan Clingan, and I'm curious as to why Clingan feels like he might even go number one. Like, he probably won't. It seems like that's going to be Sarr, but like you'll see mocks where that happens. There's Clingan, consensus top 5 guy at least, whereas Edey, sort of mid to late first round seems like where he's going to go. What is the differentiator between the two? Because it feels like Edey even maybe has more offensive polish than Clingan. I think a lot of the questions, you've noted them in your coverage of Clingan, the sort of offensive limitations seem very real there. What is the difference between Edey and Clingan? Is it just like a little bit of mobility? Like, where does this sort of dividing line between Donovan Clingan and Zach Edey come in?
Yeah, I think there is a sizable gap in the two of them in terms of defensive instincts and rim protection and the ability to play a little bit more to the level and cover ground defensively. Now, Clingan isn't, Bam Adebayo or Anthony Davis or anybody like that, but his ability to, get out to shooters and come up higher to the level and contain and recover back to the basket. He does that just a little bit better than Edey, and especially as somebody who is 2 years younger than him. I think that, teams and myself buy that a little bit more, especially when you look around the league and see those guys who anchor top defenses. You look around the playoffs, you got a Rudy Gobert, even a rookie Derek Lively, Chet Holmgren. A lot of these guys are a part of the winning teams around the NBA, Jared Allen and Evan Mobley in Cleveland. So that is the kind of appeal between the two of them. Now, you made a good point. Like, Edey does have better touch around the rim. He's just naturally a better scorer, even as, sort of a old school his game could have been at Purdue at times. He does have more of that. So that's one of the reasons I think Clingan at 1 or in certain spots high is a little bit more of a gamble in some ways, because we just haven't seen those guys pan out in terms of reaching like the highest upside. But, that's the difference to me.
Yeah, for sure. Kind of in the sort of realm of traditional guys who are mostly going to play minutes at the 5. I think the guys we're going to talk about today, the last 3, Holmes, Smith, and Filipowski, I think have a little bit of 4-5 versatility. I actually think Holmes could slide up even to the 3. I think I'm in the minority on this, but I'm also a big Daron Holmes sicko. We could talk about him. When it comes to Zach Edey, the other two guys sort of that I think are more traditional 5s here, Yves Missi from Baylor and Kel'el Ware out of Indiana. I really like both Missi and Ware as potential fits with the Raptors. A little bit different, right? Kel'el feels a little bit more further along offensively. Missi got a lot of work to do there, but just kind of has the raw athleticism and defensive instincts that are pretty exciting. So I'm going to put you on the spot here, Keandre. Pick one, Kel'el Ware, Yves Missi as a fit with the Toronto Raptors at 19. Who you got?
Yeah, I would go with Kel'el Ware.
Okay.
I think I would buy his, he's a little bit bigger. Great combine testing. I think that I buy his, shooting upside and what he's shown there from the last couple years and going back to high school in that way. I think, even with some of the sort of motor or tenacity questions that may still exist to an extent, obviously they improved this year at Indiana from being a freshman at Oregon, but those will be some of the downside, and also maybe some defensive discipline and awareness at times. But I think that, he has the pieces to be a really impactful player in the league in a way that there really aren't a whole lot of guys in this class. Even a guy like those that are mocked in the top 5 don't necessarily have in the way that he's shown so far. So the ways that he was able to impact the game as a play finisher and scoring the post a little bit as well, I would give the edge to him. But, Missi is a guy who has a little bit more defensive versatility in terms of just ground coverage, defending on the perimeter a little more. And while the production wasn't there in the same way offensively, and I don't think he's really ever going to be that type of talent unless he's in the perfect spot where it's just, a Trae Young, a Luka, where he's just, spoon feeding him shots. He's able to finish plays above the rim and at times, attack a closeout or keep off of a handoff action or delay. but yeah, some of his issues in terms of like foul trouble and the lower production are some things that I would put him a little bit lower than Kel'el Ware if I was the Raptors, or some of those same teams in that 15 to 25 range.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think while I think Missi probably nets out as a better individual defender, I just think the swing, if Ware's 3-point shooting like sustains over higher volume, is pretty insane, just considering those are the types of guys who, man the five for the best teams these days, right? Like if you can bomb threes and protect the rim and be 7 feet tall with enormous wingspan, like that gives you a whole lot of ability to be on the floor when things matter most for your team. And the motor stuff, yeah, like that's maybe a red flag. Let's kind of dig into that a little bit more, right? Because I mean, you certainly have watched a lot more Kel'el Ware than I have. Where does the motor stuff come from? And you mentioned it got a little bit better in Indiana. Like, in which ways do you think it got better in his second season at college?
Yeah, I think a lot of it. I've been trying to completely define motor and just like what we necessarily mean by that, because I think sometimes he was out there trying this year and it was a lot better. And the things that he did at Oregon his first year, there might be a missed box off or just a lack of attention to detail on, getting over to make a block, help side, those types of things, or coming up fully to the screen. Those types of things weren't necessarily there. And that's why, Dana Altman went in a different direction a lot of times as a freshman. As at Indiana, those things were better, but they did pop up from time to time. Somewhat could have been a nature of playing more minutes and having such a drastic change in role this year as the carrier of their offense in a lot of ways. But yeah, I think it's more about like, can he physically dish out, enough to hang with certain bigs, even like a random Tuesday playing against Jonas Valanciunas, or, can he do all the things, check all the boxes in that way? That's the big question. It's not necessarily like, oh, this guy's just lazy. It's just certain things that aren't really there in as much as you would necessarily want it in the way that maybe a Donovan Clingan or somebody else has that a little bit more.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, look, he's projected to go in the mid to late first round for a reason. I think if there were no questions about Kel'el Ware, he'd be a top 5 guy in his class with the upside, right? So you take the risk with all the potential good that can come from it, and I think that's probably a worthwhile play at 19. He's probably, my board kind of evolves by the day, as it does this time of year, but I think he's probably in sort of the top 3 of guys I'm hoping the Raptors go at 19. Go for it 19 if he's there. One guy who is a clear number 1, and I don't think is going to be unseated from that perch, is Daron Holmes II. He leads the class of guys who could play a little 4, a little bit of 5. And as I mentioned with Daron Holmes, I'm kind of high on him having a little bit more flex positionally than that. We're going to talk about those guys coming up to round out the show in just one sec. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks, the single best place to play daily fantasy sports. It's a wonderful thing because it's exactly as daily fantasy should be. It's not you against some expert in a basement with a lineup you can't beat. No, it's just you against your own ability to pick against the projections. You're just picking more or less on 2 to 6 player stats in a given game, and you are off and running to the races if you can get those picks right. With Prize Picks, you could turn $10 into $1,000 in a single game watching your favorite sports this summer. You can make a Prize Picks lineup in as little as 60 seconds. You just got to pick more or less than 2 or 6 player stats projections, and you're locked in. And there's always action on Prize Picks, and it's the perfect time to try out something new as the NBA season's winding down. Could be over as soon as tonight, although we're really hoping for that really hilarious best thing to ever happen in sports, Celtics collapse in this finals. Fingers crossed, baby. But if not, you can try out esports this month on Prize Picks, because for every Wednesday and Saturday in June, if your lineup doesn't win, you're going to get an entry fee back. You can choose from Counter-Strike 2, Call of Duty, League of Legends, and so much more, on top of all the typical sports that you can go and peruse on Prize Picks. Every league under the sun is there. Download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDINNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code LOCKEDINNBA for a first deposit match up to $100 with Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Back at it here, rounding it out with our pal Keandre from Hoop Intellect as we continue to talk about the bigs who could be there in the Toronto Raptors range. We talked about the more traditional, going to play the 5 guys. The next 3 guys I want to get into could all sort of mold, I think, between 4 or 5, depending on the lineup construction, depending on sort of certain swing skills and how they come along. Kyle Filipowski, Ron Holmes, Tyler Smith kind of round out the group of guys who could/should be there when the Raptors are on the clock at 19. I want to start with Daron Holmes. I am so in love with Daron Holmes. Keandre, I can't, like, every year there's a guy. And look, sometimes it's like Kobe Buffkin, who, hey, I still think has a shot. He was the guy I was fully in on last year for the Raptors at 13. Happy with Grady Dick, but I'm rooting for Kobe Buffkin to be good, if nothing other than to say that I was right. But Daron Holmes, jack of all trades, seems to do a little bit of everything, seems to have some rim protection juice, can play the 4 or the 5, might have some like playmaking 4 upside. I am so in on Daron Holmes, and maybe this is because my dearly beloved Pascal Siakam was just traded away for a whole bunch of nothing, and I'm looking for some sort of exciting athletic forward type to fill the void in my heart. But Daron Holmes, what's your sort of read on him, Keandre? Why is he not in the top 5 on every board? I'm in love with this dude, and I think he would be an absolutely perfect fit with the Raptors, who would need a little bit of stuff on the wing, a little bit of stuff at the 5. I think he could offer a little bit of both. You can tell me I'm crazy if you want to. That's what you're here for. Talk me down to earth or keep on shoot me to the moon.
Yeah, so, I mean, Daron Holmes is one of the more versatile scoring bigs in the class. I think, you hit on a couple of those things, and he was very productive as an interior scorer, both, on post-ups, duck-ins, those types of things, and also as a roll man and as a lob threat around the rim. So I think, whether he does play at the 4 or the 5, depending on who else is out there, that's stuff that he's going to be able to do fairly well in the NBA. And I also think, the way that he was able to stretch the floor this year from 3, that's the piece that has got him to be, what I think is, easy top 20, potential in the draft. You see him different places on mocks, but I think that's where he should land on draft night. And I think, you've got a guy who can play the 4 or the 5 offensively and be able to stretch the floor, attack closeouts. He's done that in an underrated way the last couple of years of his college career, and then is also able to make certain plays out of the post and read defenses pretty well in that respect too. Now, the thing with him that I have more of a hesitation on, and I think is why there might be a little bit more of a bigger range in his draft range, is, can he hold up physically at the 5 enough to play? And the relationship between his 3-point shot, is it real enough? He's only shot it really well 1 year in college. And then also, can he play well enough defensively on the perimeter? That stuff, I think he's mobile enough to do certain things in a way that like a Zach Edey isn't necessarily naturally as gifted. But at the same time, that didn't necessarily translate to his pick and roll defense or ground coverage and just being able to be out there and handle some of the things that a 4 would have to do in the NBA and maybe have to match up with a wing or, one of those guys on occasion. So I think that's my biggest hesitation with him. But at a certain point in the draft, I'm betting on, the athletic tools, the versatility as a scorer, and, also, for a team like the Raptors, being able to do a number of things. If you got an Olynyk out there, or even if you have Pirtle, having the potential of a guy who can stretch the floor, provide some help side rim protection, or, provide, floor spacing for a guy like Scotty Barnes if he's playing the 5, that's kind of the guy that you want. And obviously, I know a lot of Raptors fans were hoping that they would move up to get a guy like Alex Sarr to kind of fill that hypothetical or dream piece at the 5. But I think Daron Holmes fills a lot of those pieces even as an older college player, and at 19 that could be really good value.
Yeah, I think that's maybe my favorite thing about him is that he could play in lineups with Kelly Olynyk, offer some rim protection when Olynyk maybe kind of gives up blow by after blow by. Could play at the 4 next to Jakob Poeltl in his more traditional sort of position, or Jak's traditional position. You have that sort of help side rim protection. Maybe you slide Scotty Barnes up to the 3, which isn't my favorite thing in the world, but you can fill those minutes when Scotty sits as well and still have that threat of backline rim protection behind Poeltl that Scotty provides when he's in there playing the 4. more. And I also think like Scotty Holmes 4-5 lineups, sign me up. I'm all in on those long, bizarro sort of core Raptors lineups of the past style groupings. I would be very, very in on that. I know, like, look, everyone hitches their wagon to these guys. I was really upset when the Raptors took Jonas Valanciunas over Brandon Knight. It's very possible I'm wrong here, but I'm a pretty big believer in Holmes. I think if I was doing like a full board, he'd probably be in my top 10 or 12. Honestly, I just love so much of what he does, but I'm also a little sicko for guys who can score in the post and pass and stuff like that too. He's exactly my kind of player, frankly.
I agree. And I would just add, as your earlier point to the Timberwolves and their three bigs and the way that they've done things, even if he like maxes out as a third big, I think at 19, that's a perfectly fine player to have. If he's producing anywhere near like a Naz Reid was this year, then you're like, that's something that's going to help you win down the line. So
100%. A couple other guys who I think I'm a little more lukewarm on, although I will say Kyle Filipowski is interesting to me because of the ball skill he has at his size. Kyle Filipowski, Tyler Smith, I'll do the same thing for you. I'll have you pick one. I think Smith kind of came into the year, was sort of like G League Ignite, big who shoots threes, and maybe didn't do a whole lot else than just shoot threes at the G League Ignite. Filipowski, it seemed like he was maybe projected to go in the lottery last year if he stayed in the draft. Ends up going back to Duke, comes out this year. Seems like he's projected a little bit lower than he might have gone last year, but kind of in the same range. So it doesn't seem like he hurt his draft stock too much with that decision. Filipowski has like a lot more to do with the ball in his hands than Tyler Smith tends to. But I guess there's questions of, do you want to prioritize possessions for a Kyle Filipowski? Can he hang defensively as a 4 or a 5? Same question for Tyler Smith. Who you got, Kyle Filipowski or Tyler Smith, better fit with the Raptors at 19?
Yeah, this is a tough question too. I think I would probably lean Flip. Because I just have a little bit more confidence in some of that skill level, his ability to make passes, put the ball on the floor, and also potentially stretch the floor. And I also think he has a better chance of playing the 5 in the NBA. And just some of his improvements that he made defensively, that was a big question of mine. And why I was a little bit lower on him last year as a prospect, but he came back and made some necessary improvements in that way. And then for Tyler Smith, I like him as a stretch 4. I think he might be kind of purely a 4 just because he doesn't necessarily offer too much in terms of rim protection. There's also size, issues and just being able to handle some of those things, finish possessions, that type of stuff. I like him enough, stretch shooter. I just think that archetype can be a little bit difficult to, fit into a lineup at times. So I would probably go, Filipowski for that reason. I think it would be more of a long-term thing with both of them. I think both of Olynyk and Poeltl would probably, one of them is getting moved at a certain point and things would be a little bit more clear, because I think at Filipowski's best, he probably looks something like Olynyk or like a Mo Wagner, somewhere in that sort of general range. So that would be kind of the thing that I would see for both of them. But yeah,
that's I think a pretty great breakdown. Smith, I feel like if it were 2015, Tyler Smith would be like all the rage. It's like, big guy who shoots threes. Like, we're just realizing this is cool now. Let's go get this guy high. But it feels like you got to have a little bit more in the toolkit now, right? Like, you can't just be a stationary 3-point shooter. You got to have an ability to attack a closeout. You got to have some defensive versatility. And it just feels like Tyler Smith is lacking in sort of those like ancillary skills. But again, he's a young guy. The G League Ignite was not exactly a perfect developmental environment. So maybe there's a little bit more that we haven't seen from Tyler Smith, but I tend to agree. I think I'd prefer Filipowski, although I'd still take Holmes over both of those guys for the Raptors at 19. We've talked about 6 bigs here, Keandre. I'm going to ask you 2 questions. One, pick one of these 6. If the Raptors, say they're all on the board for the Raptors at 19, who you going with? And then beyond that, give me one prospect we haven't talked about today, any position who you kind of like as a potential fit with the Raptors there at 19 or 31. Obviously, we keep on talking about 31 like it's this afterthought. I just kind of view this whole group as guys who could go at 19 and or 31 because it feels so wide open. But so of these 6, who you got for the Raptors, and then anyone else beyond that, give me a guy you like at 19.
Yeah, so this is a tough question. I think all of these guys are pretty much in the a similar range for me on my board. I would probably lean towards, and for the Raptors specifically, I would probably lean Kel'el Ware. I think I have a little bit more confidence in him doing big things well at the 5, and I would give him the edge over to Ron Holmes, would be my second, as a close second. And we kind of touched on a lot of things, and in his versatility and being able to play in different lineups. So he would be a close second for me, but I like Ware's upside as somebody who can, protect the rim, finish plays, has NBA level size, and tested out great at the combine athletically and all those types of things. So that would be the guy who gets the edge for me. But again, pretty close and tough decision there. And
right on. And yeah, any other prospect, any position, who you like for the Raptors at 19? Just a name that comes to mind.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of players I think could be in that sort of general range, because there's so many different directions those other teams in front of them could go. But I like guys. I'll give you two at 19. Okay. I like Bub Carrington out of Pitt.
Yeah.
His stock is rising a little bit more as we speak. But his ability to create shots is on the perimeter is at least up there with almost anybody in this class. Has pretty good size for a guard, and improved quite a bit as a defender and playmaker over the course of the year. So I think for a team like Toronto, having another guy in there who can, create things, makes things happen, that would be something I would be interested in. And then another guy in Jalen Tyson out of Cal, 6'6", 6'7" wing, older player, but has a lot of ball skills and able to dribble, pass, shoot. I believe a little bit more in his defensive capabilities based off of what he showed in previous years. This Cal team wasn't particularly good in that respect, but he's somebody else that I would be sort of interested in as a do-it-all wing, and somebody that could fit in a lot of different spaces. So those two would be at least towards the top of my list for them as well.
I love it. I'm a big fan of both guys. I think with Bub, he feels almost to me like the safest guard bet, maybe beyond Rob Dillingham, to be like a high-end creator. And I think Dillingham is going to be very dependent on whether or not Wemby is his center or not, as far as like how far his defense can go. But I love Bub. I love the size, and I really, really think he'd be a fun fit, and someone who could fit in lineups with Emmanuel quickly long-term, which I think is an important thing if you're taking a guard. And Tyson, a few weeks back, I had Max Bombach from No Ceilings on, and I had a scorcher for him where I said I think Jalen Tyson is the most likely player from this draft to win a scoring title one day. I don't think anyone in this class is winning a scoring title, but I love Jalen Tyson. I know that you're higher on him than a lot of people, and it's one big reason we love you, man. It's reaffirming my biases. Huge on Jalen Tyson, so I don't hate that at all for the Raptors at 19. And frankly, as much as we're high on him, it feels like he could be there at 31 for sure, too.
Yeah, definitely.
Keandre, this was a delight. Thank you so much for taking the time, man. I know it's a crazy busy time of year. I kept you long, and I apologize for that, but thank you for all the wonderful insight. Where can people check out your amazing work?
Yeah, so you can find me on YouTube, Hoopin' the Legs. I'm on Twitter as well. Be posting a lot of different content and stuff leading up to the draft, and Instagram also at Hoopin' the Legs. So a lot of different stuff, coming over the next couple of weeks as we get closer to draft and after the draft with recaps and all those types of things. So you can definitely find all that stuff over there.
You do fantastic work. It's been an absolute treat to have you. I wanted to have you on for a while, so thank you for taking the time out, man. Enjoy the lead up to the draft, and we will cackle in joy when Jalen Tyson goes and drops 20 a game next season and wins Rookie of the Year. You can find me at Woodley Sean. Follow, subscribe, rate, review, tell a friend, all that good stuff on the audio app of your choice, on YouTube as well. Go subscribe there while you go and subscribe to Hoop Intellect as well. Of course, you can find all of my work over on the Hell website and all of that good stuff. We'll be back again on Tuesday as we continue to do draft talk all week long. I'm going to do my big board by the end of the week, so you have that to look forward to. Probably Friday, we're looking at that for the Raptors' final big board at 19 and or 31. Lots of good stuff on tap this week. We'll talk to you as the week progresses. Thanks so much for hanging. Bye-bye.